Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Evolving Man podcast. My name is Alan DeMonto, and I'm the founder of The Awakened Man. As we continue 2021's theme of reclaim, retool, and respond, we finally come up to the end of Q1, or our first quarter. It was all about focusing on what a growth mindset looked like and how we can develop a growth mindset. And we finish it off with March's theme of habits. And so we're going to unpack all different areas of how habits are developed, things that prevent us from having habits. And so we're really going to dive into this subject. But before I get into today's episode, I just want to encourage you to join our brotherhood, the Band of Brothers. This is our community of strong, resilient men, where each man is dedicated to his growth and the growth of his brothers. You see, we meet on a weekly basis, and it's a place where we really get in depth in all of the topics. So you get some weekly reading as well as some exercises to help lock in the lessons that we're attempting to learn for ourselves. And if you really want to look at leveling up your life, then I encourage you to join the Hero's Quest. It's that next level up, whereas you get an opportunity to focus on in this particular area of your life, something that you really wish to improve or wanting to improve, and you get a lot of face time with me. And so if that being said, let's get started in today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Luckily, throughout history, there exists a few good men we can look to for guidance. Strong, confident, driven. Men who weren't afraid to face the greatest tyrant they've ever known, their minds. Forged in the fire of their shadows, these men knew who they were at their core. Solid in their convictions, owners of their reality, men of action, strength, and character, masters of their destiny. Today's man is no different. The hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve them or the world. There's never been a better time than today for men to stand up and claim their stake. It's time to reconnect to your life purpose. Evolving into husbands and fathers our wives and children deserve. Becoming masters of our life and the leaders of our homes and community. Ever evolving, today's man is assured he is aligned for greatness. Welcome to the movement. Stay strong, my brother.
Hey, gentlemen, here we go. Let's get started with today's episode all about habits. And as you know by now, if you've listened for any length of time, I always like to start off with a couple of thought-provoking questions to help us really focus and lock into what it is that we're going to talk about. So I've taken a ton of notes today, so you may see me reading off the screen. It's just to make sure I get everything through to you guys, because it's really important that we understand this topic as best that we can. And so the two questions I'd like you to consider is, number one is, what recurring problem do you have in your life? And could that problem be solved by habits? So let that sink in a little bit. What problem do you have in your life? And could that problem be resolved by habits? And the second question I'd like us to consider is, what system do you use to keep track of your habits? Do you have a system in place? Is there some way that you record your habits to get a sense of how they're working? So with that said, that's what we're going to talk about. Let's get into today's topic. And what I wanted to do is break it up a little bit bigger before we really just dive into atomic habits, because that's really what we're going to talk about, James Clear's book today. But over the month of March, there's 5 Tuesdays, and we meet on a Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And so each week we touch on a different part of habits. And the first week, this past Tuesday, was all about atomic habits in James's book. And then the upcoming weeks, we're going to touch on overcoming procrastination, learning to build a new skill, the power of focus, and really leveling up your habits into what are called rituals. And so this month is really important for us to really set the stage as we're finishing up Q1 into 2021 to ensure that the things that we said we were going to do, we actually end up by doing. So let's start off with, what are habits? See, habits are small decisions that we make and actions that we perform each and every day. That makes sense, doesn't it? And according to researchers at Duke University, habits account for about 40% of our behaviors on any given day. So think about this. 40% of the things that we do become a habit, which means it's most likely an unconscious event. So we're not even paying attention to what's going on. So 40% of our day, almost half of our day, is automatic. And so it can seem quite easy that we could fall down by having poor habits, or we can really raise our level if our habits are done correctly. And so with this in mind, let's have a look at what the sum total of our habits bring us. See, how in shape we are will be the result of our habits. And this is an important one for me because weight is something that I've struggled with for at least a decade or two now, as I'm really looking to reduce my body mass in order to stay healthy. I'm into my 50s now, and so things are different. The body doesn't work like it did when I was in my 20s. And so how happy or unhappy we are in our results is all based on the type of habits that we have around that result. And how successful or unsuccessful we are is also based on the habits that we use each and every day. So what you do repeatedly, that is, what we spend time doing each day, ultimately forms the person that we are. It's hard to avoid that, is it? Right? If you're like me and you're looking to improve your body weight and get into better shape, standing in the mirror isn't always the greatest thing to look at. But it's also can be encouraging depending on the mindset that you have moving forward. And so we need to look at how we can change that. And when we learn how to transform our habits, we ultimately learn to transform our lives. So I've already kind of touched on a little bit about, saying words like good or bad. So let's talk about that. What is it? Is a habit good or bad? Well, technically speaking, they aren't good or bad, right? Habits are though effective or ineffective. You see, if a habit effectively solves a problem that we're facing, then you'll have a good reason to repeat it. That makes sense, right? And all habits in some way will serve us, even the bad ones, which is why we continue to repeat our bad habits. Like if you're biting your nails for you to ease your stress or anxiety, that is an example of necessarily not a bad habit of chewing your nails, but it serves a purpose because it helps you to relieve some stress and some anxiety. So here's a way that I want you to think about how you can distinguish between whether a habit is good or bad. So a habit is good or bad, and it usually depends on the long-term benefits or consequences to our behavior. So generally speaking, good habits will have positive outcomes in the long run, whereas bad habits will have negative outcomes. So let's go back to my weight loss topic. See, I like to snack at night. My evening ritual includes, after doing a little bit of homework or whatever it is I'm working on, is to spend the last hour and a half reading something, whether it's some nonfiction, something that I'm really interested in, or just reading something for pleasure. And in that experience, I also like to have that last little bit of snack before going to bed. So what's wrong with snacking? There isn't necessarily inherently wrong with the snacking. It really depends on the kind of snack and the amount of calories that I'm looking to consume. And so one of the things that my wife is doing right now is she's using Noom to help her gain control of her weight and her weight loss. And it was interesting. I did a little bit of this with her in the beginning, and I realized that I'm a fog eater. In other words, when I'm sitting there and I'm reading in my book or I'm watching a TV show, I'm not focused on what I'm consuming. And so the bowl of chips or nuts or whatever that's sitting beside me inherently isn't necessarily bad, but because I'm not paying attention, it's a mouthful after mouthful after mouthful. It's quite easy to consume 1,000, 1,500 calories in a short period of time because I'm fog eating. I'm not paying attention. I'm not conscious to it. So keep that in mind when we think about how it is that we distinguish ourselves, right? And distinguish whether a habit is good or the habit is poor. See, and habits are also all about identity, right? So changing habits can be challenging, and it's challenging for two reasons. And Jay, I'm starting to get into James's stuff here really in depth. And he says, we try to change the wrong thing when we're trying to change habits. And number two, we try to change our habits the wrong way. And I never really thought about that until he mentioned that in the book, and it makes complete sense. So he says, here's a tip. He says the key to building lasting habits is focusing on creating a new identity first. Your current behaviors are simply a reflection of your current identity. Yeah, that resonates with me. What you do now is a mirror image of the type of person you believe that you are, either consciously or unconsciously. So to change your behavior for good, you need to start believing new things about yourself. You need to build identity-based habits. And so again, go back to my weight loss journey. So my goal is that I wish to weigh 195 pounds. Well, my focus for years has always been on that number. I need to weigh 195 pounds. That was my focus. But see, that's an outcome-based habit. And so guess how my progress has been for the last decade, 2 decades? It hasn't been great. Yeah, I lose a little bit of weight, but in the end, nothing really changes. And so I end up by not losing the weight, getting to that goal of 195 pounds. So today, now my focus is on myself and who I am, who I see myself as being. See, I see myself as being that I am the person that enjoys fitness and eating well. And because I've made that distinction that I enjoy fitness and eating well instead of focusing on a number, since last June, I've lost about 15 pounds. And most of that has really happened in 2021. And so it's a key distinction that when we see ourselves as that person that is a powerful mind shift change for us in order for us to increase the ability to do our habits. So, quote here from James's book, he says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." So think about that. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. This is touching on that second question I asked at the start of today's podcast. See, outcomes are what you get, the processes are what you do, and identity is about what you believe. So when you're looking to create habits, our mantra should be, I am the kind of person who, and then finish it up, right? I am the kind of person who, and then we finish it up. This is the most effective way at creating habits because if you don't follow through, then what you're really doing is creating some cognitive dissonance inside of your head saying, well, you're saying that this is the kind of person that you are, but your actions are saying something different. And so this is where the battleground will be. For weak men, this is where they're going to crumble. And for strong men, this is where they'll rise up and live another day. So don't get me wrong here. All of us struggle and stumble and fall as we build new habits. That's part of life. Listen, I fall and I struggle as well. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm some guru habit guy, because I'm not. I struggle with the weight one, which is why I'm talking about it, because it is so personal and I can totally relate to everything that James is saying in this book. But it's up to me to believe, to want to change the narrative that's seeing and believing that we are powerful and strong men. Okay, so let me ask a question about what probably everybody is thinking right now. How long does it take to develop a habit? Well, I've got some bad news for you. It's not about how long, it's about how many. I remember hearing years ago, listening to different motivational speakers talk about it takes 21 days to develop a habit. And most recently, they're saying now it's 66 days to develop a habit. I actually received an email from Robin Sharma, and that's exactly what he said, 66 days. But the challenge is that study that is being mentioned is that it was the first study, the 21-day one, was actually made up. And the second one, the study actually had a range of time that habits would form, anywhere from 21 days to 240 plus days. Man, that's over 8 months. See, the truth is not about how long it's going to take for the habit to form, because it could take a long time or it could take a short time. The fact of the matter is that in order to develop a good habit, it's about the number of repetitions that you do in order for the habit to become that automatic piece, that falls into that 40% that we talked about earlier. So how long does it take to develop a habit? It takes as long as it takes. Focus on the repetitions. That's the key to developing strong habits. So James goes into a little later into the book, and he talks about the 4 laws of breaking and building habits. And so I'm going to focus on building habits today, because in essence, I should say, breaking habits is just the opposite of what we're going to talk about. And so the first one that he says is the law 1 is to make it obvious, right? So in this law, he's talking about this idea of habit stacking. So this is where you bundle current habit with a new one. So I'll keep going back to my weight loss example, right? My habit stack is that when I get up in the morning, I'll put on my workout clothes. So I do this even before going to take a piss. Why is that? Because I already know that the moment that I leave the bedroom, if I haven't got my workout clothes on, the likelihood of me going back is going to be more difficult, and it likely won't happen, because I'll come up with lots of excuses. It's time to get a coffee. I'm going to go do something else. So I'm starting to build a ritual and stacking things, habits upon habits, in order to lock this thing in. The second thing, the law that he talks about, is making it attractive. So in this law, he's talking about temptation building. So this is when you pair a short-term and a long-term gratification together. So I mentioned earlier, so for me, I like to snack when I read. And so to eat healthy, I now choose to eat a healthy snack when I'm reading. I love to read. And so in order to build upon that pleasure, instead of having a bowl of chips or I'm a salty kind of guy, so I like salty stuff, I instead then put a set of vegetables or kale chips or something that's healthier for me to nibble on. And so that it helps build that, makes it more attractive now, in order for me to not necessarily kill that habit of snacking completely. I still manage what my calories are. I portion it out, and I know this is what I have for my time. But it builds on the pleasure of reading. So it helps me want to stay focused and stay on with the habit. So then the third law, he says, is let's make it easy. So in this law, what James is really referring to is about the 1% rule. And I mentioned a little bit earlier about this 1%, and he did his study on this 1%. And if we improve 1% a day for 365 days, that improvement works out to almost 38% improvement. The flip side to that is if we do nothing every day and we don't improve by 1% over the course of a year, guess what happens? You guessed it, nothing. And so it's really important for us to think about how it is that we're going to build our habits. So part of this law is also about how we chunk the habit. And he encourages us to make it ridiculously small to accomplish. And then we can start to look at building this 1% increase each day. So let's go back to my weight loss piece. See, I used to believe that when I would get into the mode of, okay, I want to lose some weight, we're going to really do this. And yeah, I'm going to the gym. It's going to be 5 days a week. I'm going to work out for an hour and do a bunch of weights. I'm going to do some cardio. And guess what ended up happening? Yeah, maybe 1-2 days and it was done. So instead of saying that I was going to go work out 5 days in a row, then I thought, well, maybe I can work out every other day. Well, but even that's a big ask, right? And I thought, well, maybe I'll just work out 30 minutes a day. Well, that can still be a big ask for me. I know what my habits are like. I need to change these habits. 15 minutes a day? No, I actually came down to the point where, you know what, I'm going to do 5 minutes. 5 minutes of stretching, actually. Stretching my lower back, stretching. I sit quite a bit for my job, so I wanted to be able to loosen my hip flexors and my hips in general. And so 5 minutes. Well, 5 minutes soon became 8 minutes, which soon became 12 minutes, which soon becomes 15 minutes. And so it took time for me to realize that the smaller I made this, the less daunting it was. And it really fought this cognitive dissonance, between my brain saying, well, what do you mean you can't work out for 5 minutes? And I just couldn't accept by saying I can't work out for 5 minutes. I could say I couldn't work out, get in my car and drive to the Y, but how could I tell myself that I can't work out for 5 minutes? And so it's important that we look at how we build our habits and starting incredibly small. In my men's group, we were talking about this past Tuesday, and one gentleman was discussing how he likes to read books. And so I asked him, so how many books do you want to read this year? And he didn't really have an idea. And I said, well, Do you think you could read 10 pages a day? And he said, yeah, I think I could read 10 pages a day. Well, the average book's about 250 to 350 pages, give or take. So if you read 10 pages a day, you'd read a book a month if you read every day. And now some days you're not going to read 10 pages. Some days you may read 20. Other days you might read 2. The point is, if you average it out, you read 10 pages. And even that might have been a big chunk for him to swallow. But when I went through that exercise with him, he realized that he could read 12 books a year. Now, when I first think about that, that's a lot of books to read. If you're somebody that doesn't necessarily read, or even if you say you like to read, you probably didn't really recognize how many books you could read. And so you could see the expression on his face that the wheels were turning in his mind of how, yeah, maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 5 pages or whatever it is that he decides. But it gave him an opportunity to move it out of his mind and making it a challenge for him, because he was really struggling with wrapping his head around it, to having something more concrete, something that he could follow. So that's the power of really understanding of how we can chunk our habits into bite-sized pieces that make sense for us in order for us to be successful. And of course, the final law he had was make it satisfying. And so in this law, he's really talking about keystone habits. And keystone habits are ones where they create a ripple effect in other areas of our life. That's why weight loss is such a big habit for people to develop. Because when you start working out, you automatically start thinking about eating better. Your mind gets clearer because you're eating better and because you're working out. You have more energy, so now you have more energy to do things with your family and your children. And your performance at work also improves because you have the energy and the clarity of mind. And so it's a great keystone habit to develop a workout routine of some sort. And so once we do this, and we've implemented these 4 laws, and we're starting to take care of it, how do we know if we're being successful? Like, how are we measuring ourselves? And so that's where it came down to that second question. And I asked about, how are you tracking? And so there are lots of habit trackers. James has a habit tracker that he uses. Years ago, when I read Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, he had a great habit tracker and that focused on the different areas of your life and in how he thought of life. And I thought that was really cool. But you see, a habit tracker will allows us to focus on process instead of an outcome. Right? When you think about the stonecutter model, that a stonecutter's artwork is revealed not on the last tap, but on the hundreds and thousands of taps and hits that he's done or she's done on that piece of marble or stone, until it finally boils up, and then voila, we see that change. And so if we don't necessarily have the appreciation to see the journey if we don't track our habits. And so the same goes for us, that we should be looking at, and we develop a way to track that. Now, I've given you a couple of options. You can get James's habit tracker and that he has, and there's Covey, and there's lots of them out there. And one of the things because I felt this was so important for men that joined the Brotherhood with the Band of Brothers and the Awakened Man movement, is that in the Hero's Quest, which I told you earlier was a 90-day improvement program that really helps you focus on a particular area of your life, is that I created a tool that tracks your major outcome for a period of 12 weeks. And then each week has a table that allows you to track your non-negotiables. These are the habits. These are your keystone habits, the things that you're just not going to drop, and the things that you need to make sure you're doing. And with that, it's simply a check mark or an X to say, hey, how often am I doing it? The plan is to do it every day, then you'll have it right there in front of you. You also create a section within that as well that allows you to track the other action items that you need to take for the week in order to follow your major goal. So we always write down our major goal each week. So we have it front and center, that what is it that I'm attempting to accomplish by the end of these 90 days. And the other side of that page is a journal. And for us to have an opportunity to write down our thoughts and processes. What are the things that are preventing us from achieving our goal. And actually, before you even get to the actual habit tracker portion, is I walk you through a process where you will come up with 4 to 5 goals within the 6 pillars of life. And you will ask questions like, what is the habit that you want to attain? What is going to prevent you from doing it? What resources do you need in order for it to accomplish? And what are some action steps that you can take in order to complete this habit and make this habit come to fruition? And so there's lots of thought process put into this to help guys attain and develop the habits and achieve the goals that they're looking for. And so I hope you had a few takeaways with today's talk. But let me summarize them with this. Your first takeaway that I'd like you to remind you of is to shift your focus from external goals towards processes that you need developed to achieve your goal. The second is keep in mind this 1% improvement. That this daily improvement makes huge changes in the long run. We may not see it. Think of the stone cutter. We may not see it on the first or second tap, but eventually, all of a sudden, you're going to stand in front of that mirror, and all that weight's gone, and you have the body that you have envisioned. And third, place your attention on your identity. See yourself as a person. Remember, the mantra is, I am the kind of person who, and then fill in the blank. And do this for all aspects of your life. We like to focus on the 6 pillars of life. Do it in your life. Decide which one that you want to work on and keep it front and center. So listen, you can just do this and say, I'm the kind of person who, and it doesn't have to be something so profound that, it's just going to shake the world. Just as long as it's important and it makes sense for you. When you do that, then you're going to have more success. And of course, the last takeaway is to keep your actions small in the beginning. It's a repetition over time that is the ultimate determinant of success. So if you'd like to get some more guidance on managing your habits in the 6 pillars of life, we use the financial, emotional, physical, spiritual, professional, and relationships, then I recommend joining the Awakened Man community and our Band of Brothers men's circle. We offer a structured group format that focuses on these main pillars and another area that I call the 5 pillars of man. I'll get into that in other talks, where we can flush out the ideas and the responsibility of who we are as men, who we say we want to become, and where we are exactly today. So we don't leave any stone unturned. Now, if that sounds like something like you would be interested in, come in and sign up at theawakenedman.net or go directly to the membership site, which is members, plural, .theawakenedman.net. I look forward to seeing you in the Brotherhood. Thank you for joining me today. Aho, my brothers.
Thank you for listening to the Evolving Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is The Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.